All right. Well, here we are. Welcome to the last session of the Fear Not Conference. Compassion Health, in partnership with the new Westminster Seventh-day Adventist Church, brings you this conference about dealing with anxiety and stress in these uncertain times. We're so glad to have had your participation and your presence here with us this weekend. It's been a lovely weekend. We started off with a wonderful presentation by clinical counselor Golda Marty about normalization about stress, around stress. And she gave us a message letting us know that we're not alone if we're going through these things. And then we went into empowerment for CBT tools. And then we actually started to go into some of those CBT tools and actually use them, apply them to situations in our lives. And if you missed any of those sessions, I would encourage you to go to the Compassion Health Facebook page where you will have access to all of the recorded videos. And today's session is CBT Tools Part 2. So please get ready because we're going to have an interactive session today, another interactive session. And today we're going to actually have a bit of a shorter message, and we're going to really focus on the Q&A. The Q&A is going to get the spotlight today. You're going to have opportunity to tell Angela all your questions, all your questions about dealing with anxiety and stress. So Angela, how are you feeling? Are you fired up for today?
Very much so. Yes, I'm a morning person, so I'm excited to be here this morning.
Okay. Well, I'm fired up as well. I'm really excited because I know that people are going to get a chance to get some of those burning questions answered, and I know that they've been waiting for that. So, without further ado, let's get started. Please, Angela, take it away.
Oh, thank you for that, Hebron. For those of you that might be just joining us, some of this might be a little out of context. I do encourage you, like Hebron said, to watch the videos, because some of this may just sort of like be a little bit out of context if you haven't watched already. And certainly I want to spend more time on Q&A and just, bearing in mind, we want to present as much educational material as possible, but, it won't be possible for me to actually give you any therapeutic advice in a forum like this. But certainly I want to be able to answer any questions you have about anxiety or about the process of how CBT works and that kind of thing. So I thought today we had some questions about the process and what it looks like. Go ahead, Hebron.
I forgot the opening prayer.
Oh, yes, let's have that.
Okay. Dear Heavenly Father, I thank you for this day. I thank you for your love toward us. I thank you for bringing us together for another wonderful session of this conference. I thank you for Angela and her participation and the participation of all of our wonderful volunteers. Lord, I just pray that you would bring everyone who needs to be here and give them the wisdom and the courage to go ahead and ask the questions that they need answers to. I hope that this will be a wonderful session, a blessing to others, and that your will be done today. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen.
Amen.
All right. Thank you for letting me
I'm so glad you remembered. I definitely need the Holy Spirit to guide my thoughts. Being ADHD, I can tend to go all over the place.
But we're right here with you.
Yeah, good timing. So just to recap, what I find the easiest way to explain any of this material is to use a specific example. And if you were here yesterday, you remember our example was Julie. She's a made-up fictional person, student wanting to become an engineer, getting ready to finish up her assignments. And then there was an outbreak of COVID in her apartment building, and of course, bring up all these intense feelings of anxiety and worry, and so on and so forth. So I talked a little bit about a daily mood log, and I tried to brush over it because it's lingo that you won't even know, and I didn't have it ready, but I do have one ready today. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen so you can see what this looks like. And before I do that, I want to say that, there's different ways to organize your thoughts and your emotions onto paper, but writing down is so important. In the work that I have done with clients, I have had them say, well, I've done it in my head. And then when I ask them to write it down, they're like, oh, and it's just, there's a colleague of mine who is a neuroscientist said there's physical things that go on in the brain when you're writing it down. So it's one of the keys to sorting out what's going on in your mind. Not everybody's ADHD, but everyone's thoughts do kind of start to ramble and go all over the place, and it's can be difficult to articulate if you can't get it down on paper. So paper is really important. The actual way you write it down, as long as you got all the information on the page, it doesn't matter what that looks like. And there's lots of free cognitive tools out there that kind of help you get your thoughts and emotions and things like that down. The one I'm going to show you today is modeled after David's, which Hebron showed you that book, Feeling Good, and he called it the triple column when he first started, and then renamed it to the Daily Mood Log. Not that we fill it out every day, but that's the name he gave it. And then I just reformatted it for easier presentation, working online because I'm doing all my sessions online with clients. And I not only had David's permission, but now he uses these tools on his website. So I've been able to work with him in getting his tools better for telehealth. So I'll go ahead and share what this one looks like. And I'm going to try and zoom in here. So hopefully that's legible. So just let me know if you can't see the screen. And I mentioned yesterday about getting really specific, picking a moment in time. And in this moment in time here for Julie, she came home from school and found out that there was this outbreak in her apartment building. And so she was pretty anxious, worried, nervous, frightened at 90. And she felt some inferiority and she was very stressed at 100. And then yesterday we talked about the dial, that there's some really positive things about her emotions. I'm just going to scroll down to some of the things that we talked about yesterday. And we found out that anxiety and stress can protect from danger and keep her vigilant, help her study harder, remind her to wash her hands more if we're talking COVID. And of course, this would change based on your personal circumstances. Helped motivated her, keeps you from being complacent. Just a lot of actual benefits to the anxiety and the stress. And then it showed some important values as well. So I didn't fill all these in directly, but showed she valued being a good student and the money that her parents had already put into her education so far, and that she wanted, to be a good daughter, and she had high standards. And we had quite a few great comments yesterday of some things. So when we look at all these beautiful things that her anxiety says about Julie, she's not willing to just jump into danger and be ignorant of what's around her. She's being realistic, because there is some significant risk, and so because of that, she wanted to hold on to quite a bit. She got 20% of anxiety. She thought, that's appropriate in this moment when you come home and you're thinking about COVID in this moment. Boy, 20% seems pretty reasonable. 90% is too painful. It's like almost debilitating, making me feel stuck. But 20 I could manage. So that's what this is. And then we talked about, well, now how do we get to the after column a little bit? And we talked about some tools to do that. There's one called Examine the Evidence, where you might look at, all right, well, what does the evidence say? Well, right now we're learning that, there's a risk of catching COVID, and then the risk of it being really serious at Julie's age is actually fairly low. And so she could look at the evidence. It is possible, but she can look and go, I'm healthy, I'm young, and I know somebody even that had it, and she can go through some of the evidence in her life and kind of see how likely it might be for her worst fears to come true. But we also talked about getting specific with thoughts and how important that is. And so here's maybe some of Julie's possible thoughts, right? I must get good grades. So here's a rule that she's told herself. This is an immutable rule that she's labeling in her mind. This isn't I'd like to get good grades, which was the positive thought we kind of came up with, right? And so I wanted to talk today a little bit more about the distortions. So what I've done, if I go to the next page, just zoom out a little bit, on this particular one, it has the checklist of distortions. And these are very similar. You could, Wikipedia has this, and there's some that are slightly worded a little bit different. This might say black and white thinking, and overgeneralization might say catastrophizing. So and then the personalization would be sometimes instead of labeling. So other than that, they're pretty much the same. And so this is kind of the checklist, and this has been around for well over, let's see, when did he copyright that list? 88 or something. So well over 20 some odd years. Many people have used it. There's many books written on it, and they all use this list. So, all or nothing thinking. This is that black and white categories. Overgeneralization, the never-ending pattern. Since it's happened once, it's always going to happen. It's going to continue to happen forever and ever. Mental filters, ignoring the negatives and dwelling on the positives. Let's get specific to Julie's thoughts so we can really apply this. Let me see if I can try and have this at the same time. Let's put this, I must get good grades. Well, whoops. We'll put this down here so you can see the checklist and the negative thought at the same time. Oh dear. Okay, we'll just put it in here. I must get good grades. Okay, she believed that. I think it was 100%. So we're gonna look at the distortions here. Now, this is where you can put it in the chat. What distortions do you see in this negative thought? And you can write them out, or I use like AOL for all or nothing, and OG for generalization, MF for mental filter. What kind of distortions do you see in this negative thought? Go ahead and pop that in the chat. All or nothing. Yeah, definitely some all or nothing. Let me put that one in here. All or nothing. What other ones are in here? Should statement. Oh, definitely. Yeah, that must. I should. I must. I ought. I have to. That demanding language of this is a rule, a law. Labeling. Oh, yeah. I like that. Right? I'd love to hear your thoughts on how it's labeling. I can think of a couple ways it's labeling. One is I'm a bad daughter if I get bad grades, or I'm a bad student if I get bad grades, right? It's that hidden labeling that I have to be a certain thing. Yeah, great ideas. I would think also that I'm a bad Christian if I fall into sin. Yeah, I'm bad. Absolutely. Okay. And what about fortune telling? Is she kind of hinting that she's not going to get good grades? Right? Like, I must get good grades, and like the anxiety is all attached to this. And so there's this, I'm probably not going to get good grades. So there might even be some fortune telling in here. Yeah. And maybe an emotional reasoning, like, this feels like it'll be the end of the world. If I don't get good grades and I won't get into the engineering school, it's the end of my identity, the end of my world. I don't know what to do. So some emotional reasoning maybe in here as well. And maybe mental filter, like, everyone around me is getting sick, and everyone has told me I have to get good grades to get into engineering school. And so filtering out all the other grades she did well in. She already did good in class. She's that's all getting filtered out by all this negativity of the fear. And then that kind of goes with discounting the positive. That's a little bit different, where she discounts it. So someone might say, well, you are getting good grades. And she's like, yeah, but they're not good enough. Right? Yeah, I got good grades, but they're not good enough. I kind of dismissing the positive attributes of herself or the situation. Maybe even some self-blame. Here we go, self-blame, right? Because if I catch COVID and I don't get good grades, it's all my fault. But is it her fault if she's doing all the proper preparation? She's trying to be careful of not catching it, and she's protecting herself and wearing her mask, and she's doing all the things. Is it her fault if she catches this pandemic disease that's going everywhere? No, and yet here she is kind of blaming herself that I have to protect. I will be to blame. If I catch it and I don't get good grades, and that kind of thing. So you can see how when we pick one negative thought, we actually are unpacking all the negative thoughts just a little bit, right? Now we want to stay focused when we're working on with this, but I find the distortions help to kind of unpack what's really going on internally. So it's not just about one sentence, right? It's not just this one sentence that's causing Julie all this emotional distress. It's all the information, all the stuff connected to that sentence. What's behind it? Right? So that was, I wanted to do a deeper of explain the distortions, and then I would ask, knowing all of that, then knowing that this is some all or nothing, and knowing that you have been getting good grades and looking at the evidence and all these other tools, what might be a positive thought instead of I must get good grades? Anyone have any suggestions? What might be a good positive thought instead, or rational thought, or more like a counter thought? What might Julie say to herself that would be more compassionate, more uplifting? I'll try to do my best. Yeah, that's a good one. I'll try to do my best. It's a little bit like a goal, and I'm wondering if you were in this situation, would that be enough to crush the negative thought? Yeah. So what if we said, I'd like to do my best, or I'd like to do well on my grades. I'm on the journey to get good grades. Oh, I love that. I like that one. I'm on the journey to get good grades. And remember, this is, if this were a real session and you said, I'll try to do my best, I'm going to put that down because I wanted to work with whatever you feel like works. I just suspect that would not feel like it's going to crush that negative thought. It would still feel that makes sense. NT. Yeah. I'll do my best. How's that? I'll do my best. And then we could add to that. So actually, that's a great point, because sometimes we get a thought on here and we believe it 100%, 100%. Yeah, I believe that. I'll do my best. I'm doing my best, right? I am doing my best. And see how I'm tweaking it as we go. And this is how we would work together. And you could do this on your own even. You could keep tweaking it, like put it down and then tweak it. Like, I want to get that a little more power in there. What could I do to this thought to give it a little more oomph? And then Hebron has asked, how can we get measurable? What grades does she need to attend? Yeah, that would be great for goal setting. So that brings up a great question. I'm going to stop my share for a minute. Let me stop my share. It's not letting me stop. Why? There we go. Okay. That brings up a great question. So if you remember yesterday, I talked a little bit about what I called the miracle cure. And this is where we want to find out, what is it that I need right now? Like, what, and how there can be multiple goals. So we work on certain goals. Can they be worked on at the same time? And lots of times they can. And other goals, it's one at a time. And some goals are in conflict with each other. So we have to decide. We have to prioritize. And when you're talking about measurable, about the grade she needs for grade school, that would be a behavior goal setting, right? I'd certainly be happy to work with her on that. And I would say, okay, well, so she wants to get good grades. Well, what do we need to do to get there? And we would kind of start working on that goal plan. And that's kind of a different set of tools than working on her anxiety. In fact, it is a totally different set of tools. So we're working on anxiety. We're working on internal problems or issues, or however you want to label that. And when we work on goal and behavior, that's external. But there's lots of, in the 100 tools that I mentioned yesterday, lots of those are behavior oriented. So great question. I am going to open up to questions because that's kind of where I got to, and I could do some more tools on each of these negative thoughts so you can see what the tools look like. But I'd love to take questions too, and make sure we have enough time to have any questions on cognitive behavior therapy, on anything you've heard this weekend.
Well, I'm gonna get us started until we get another question in the chat, if that's okay.
Yeah.
So you talked about how this doesn't have to be necessarily a daily mood log. Can you comment on the effectiveness of, I guess, maybe not doing it daily, but maybe once a week or once every 2 weeks? Like, how does it vary if you're not
Sure.
consistent?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I would do a daily mood log when I'm feeling my emotions are not where I'd like them to be. Like they're too overwhelming. There's something going on for me. So that's when I do a daily mood log. And that might be, when you're first learning mental health tools, that might be every day. It might be multiple times a day. So I do it when I need to use the tool, right? Like I had a reaction. I have fibromyalgia, and sometimes I get waves of fatigue and sometimes some brain fog. And one morning, about a month or two ago, I felt really miserable. I was like, oh, I'm so stupid. I shouldn't be tired all the time. I know better. I know health principles. Why am I so tired? And then I was crying and I realized, whoa, wait a minute. What is triggering me? Hold the phone, grab a daily mood log, and start writing down what's going through my mind and circling the emotions. And that one I actually got a little stuck on, and I reached out for some help from a colleague. So that's when I would do it. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, definitely. We do it when we need to. And so it doesn't necessarily have to be every single day, but when you need it, you can do it. You can pull it out and get your thoughts a little bit more clear. And if you're not really feeling stuck or having experiencing significant issues, then you can probably just go on with life as long as you're feeling like you're on the ball. Is that the basic idea?
Yeah. And I think NT had unmuted, so I'm, happy to take your question if you still have a question.
Yeah, I was wondering how to recognize the negative thoughts because sometimes you've got things that have been swimming in there since you were little and you believe them, and because of your environment, everybody else says things that are similar. So how do you recognize like, oh, actually, this is an unhelpful thought?
Oh, that's a great question. So my quick answer would be, is this thought causing me problems? So if I even question it, like, I wonder if this thought is negative, that might be one to put down and analyze it and figure it out, right? So then you put it down and then you look, okay, well, how true? And of course, negative thoughts, the reason they're so painful, feel true. Like I showed you on Julie's daily mood log, is 100% true, and she's believing that, right? Like, like I'm going to be I should do this and I have to do this, or this shouldn't be happening to me, or it's unfair, or these kind of thoughts. And so one of the things that I will say, is that the one thing I like about how this daily mood log is structured, and there's quite a few structured very similarly, so I like that too, is that you've got the section for emotion, you got the upsetting event at the top, right? That's the facts. That's what's happening. This is the reality that's going on around me, and that's observable, measurable. Other people would recognize it as well. And then the next section is the emotions. All the emotions go into that section. So now I know what's left is the negative thoughts. And so what I wouldn't put in the negative thought is, I feel overwhelmed, because that's actually just you saying your emotion to yourself, right? So then I would say, well, how do I get there? So you're asking me, how do I get to those negative thoughts? There are some tools. So one tool is, I would ask, why is that upsetting to me? What is it? What's behind that? Like, why am I feeling that way? And why can be a trigger word. So sometimes I'll say one question would be, what's upsetting to me about that? You know, what's so upsetting to me about finding out that COVID is going rampant in my apartment building? What's upsetting about that? Is it because I'm worried of catching it? Is it I'm worried that, you know, someone else is going to get sick, right? Like, and I want to write these things down. And some of those might be completely 100% normal, healthy thoughts, right? Because we talked about that yesterday as well. We have normal thoughts that have painful emotions attached to them. Like, you know, my kitty died and I feel very sad and I think about missing him. And that's normal grieving process and part of life. And I can also find joy throughout the day in other things. I still have my dog and she's fun to be around, and I can kind of flow in and out of those emotions. And then another way we can come up with our negative thoughts is literally, we call it the stick man technique. So this is another tool. I've literally done this and it works. Sometimes I don't believe these are going to work till you do them. They sound really simplistic and they're like, really? And so you literally draw a stick man on a piece of paper with a thought bubble. And then you ask, what is this stick man thinking now that they've had this upsetting event, right? So whatever the trigger is. So the stick man has just come home from work and found out the dog is missing. And they're just anxious. And I don't know why I'm anxious. I'm just anxious. Well, why would that stick man, what might that stick man be thinking about the dog missing? Any ideas?
What happened to the dog?
Yeah, I shouldn't have something. I should have closed the door. This shouldn't be happening. Or my wife should have been watching, right? And something's happening to my dog. Absolutely. Yeah, right? All these thoughts are now starting to roll in. He might be dead, lost. I'll never see him again. This is terrible. This is awful, right? So those are the thoughts, but they may not come at first. It might just be first panic, like, oh no, we've got to find him, right? So stickman can be helpful at brainstorming. And then there's actually some more uncovering tools that we use as well, and called the downward arrow and what if, and there's a few to help uncover the negative thoughts. So does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
You're welcome.
Awesome. I see some other questions in the chat. I just wanted to say,
Okay.
was about, someone said that they missed some of the sessions, and don't worry, I'm sure we can do a quick recap for you, but also I will send a link back to the Facebook page where we have all the sessions listed. They're recorded there and very much accessible. So the first question that we have here is, generally, how long does it take for people to start noticing a difference after starting to use the daily mood log?
Oh, great question. I wish there was a simple one-off answer for that. And like anything in human existence, it does depend. I have had clients where I've assigned it during the consult. So like I do a consult before I see a client, and they've come with a daily mood log filled in, and just doing the daily mood log, they were able to crush all their thoughts and feelings. So they took them half an hour. But that needs to be repeated. It's not like they're cured forever. The cure is instant, but the cure needs to be repeated. Remember I talked about yesterday about the neural pathways and the big ruts that we get when we have these negative, like, we talked about these thoughts can be from our childhood. They could be all around us. People are telling us this all the time. We're telling it to ourselves all the time. Every time we tell ourselves, I'm a failure, I'm stupid, I'm an idiot. Every time we say it out loud or inside, that neural pathway is getting stronger. So also the same thing with the positives. They've got to be repeated. And what I'll do with clients is, once they've crushed their negative thoughts and they've been successful on the daily mood log, I get them to go over that repeatedly. And I think that might be the daily part that maybe David was hinting at when he said daily mood log. Maybe that's the recovery piece. I mean, eventually those become quicker. And I mentioned yesterday that a lot of times when my negative thoughts come back, I can crush them in 30 seconds or less most of the time. And there's the odd time where I do have to pull out a daily mood log myself and kind of go through it. So But I have other clients who it's taken 3 sessions to crush one negative thought, and there might be 13 negative thoughts on that daily mood log. And then another piece with anxiety, it's not just cognitive work. So this daily mood log is only the cognitive piece, but with anxiety, we also have to do exposure work because anxiety lives in the let's avoid it section of our brain. And it's very interesting. I've seen this happen many times, even in my own life, where I had one little anxious thing happen when I was young and kind of avoided that. And it started to build and build and build to the point where and this one I've worked through and I can do it, but it's still not as good as if I wouldn't. Like, meeting new people is stressful for me. Very little on the low stress now because these tools do work, but I was terrified several years ago. Like, I hated it. And everyone thought I was an extrovert because I'm ADHD and I'm very hyper. And I'm like, and I'm very opinionated and talk a lot. And so everybody thinks, oh, she must be an extrovert. And I'm like, no, like, I'm terrified to talk to new people the first time. But that grew. It wasn't like I was born that way I did have some fairly traumatic things happen to me that precipitated it. But it was the keep avoiding it and getting further and further away from, like, I just talked to less and less new people, and it just kind of grew. So anxiety loves to live in the avoid it. So along with this cognitive piece of the daily mood log, with anxiety, we always do some form of exposure work, and there's lots of different ways to do that as well. There's many different exposure tools. For example, one of the exposure tools that I've done is called shame attacking. And this Albert Ellis did this, and they actually have shame attacking competitions now. And this is extremely powerful for social anxiety. And I remember actually thinking, gee, we used to do this in church and Pathfinders. Some of these things, and some of these things that you see on, like, Just for Laughs, or some of these crazy things that people do. These are things we actually issue for patients to do to conquer their anxiety. So it might be something like, I was actually with David. He was doing a seminar. I was participating as a participant in Calgary. And we went out and started randomly asking people to, sing a birthday song, just total strangers. And it's much easier in a group, for sure. So that particular one sometimes better done in a group. But I have done them on my own, and I've had clients go out and do smile and hello practice. So that's an extreme version, shame attacking. We do something crazy, or we might wear hair in a weird shape, or put makeup on upside down, or just do really silly things that would cause us a lot of anxiety, and expose ourselves to that, and just be exposed to what that is for us. And then we could do baby steps instead. So another one is smile and hello practice, which is hard to do with the masks. You have to have a clear mask, but you can do the wave. You can at least, or say hello, right? Hi. And the first time I did that one, it was terrifying, and I had to really talk myself into it. And I was like, oh, I can't do this. I can't do this. It was really, really hard. And I was at a grocery store, and I finally just did. I'm like, I have to do this. I'm just going to do it. And I did it. And it was, the next time it got easier and easier and easier. So now I can actually do that. I can smile and wave at a stranger, and it doesn't cause me any anxiety. But the baby steps are easier to do. It takes longer to crush the anxiety. The shame attacking, like when you go out, like we went out with this one fellow, he was actually a therapist, and he was terrified of meeting new people. He had a lot of social anxiety, a lot of fear. We went out, and after about 20 minutes in the walk of doing this, it went from 100, and I think he said down to like 20 in 15 minutes, because it was the extreme version. So I know that was long-winded, but that's kind of when we're trying to notice a difference. We find the right tool, you'll notice the difference. And it may be that we're not finding that right tool enough. So with the daily mood log, it's, am I crushing this negative thought, right? Like the positive thought, or realistic thought, or rational thought, however you want to say that, counter thought, that's got to be 100% true. There's 2 conditions. It has to be 100% true. And then it also has to move that negative thought, either a little or a lot. And then we keep tweaking that positive thought until it crushes that negative thought. And by crush, I mean 20 or less. It kind of depends on the thought. Some thoughts have a lot of truth to them. For instance, let's look at Julie's thought, I must get good grades. If her goal is to get into engineering and she needs to have a high GPA, then there's some real truth to that statement, right? So we want to take out the kick. We want to take out the self-defeating, the self-bashing portion of that thought. But a lot of that thought's going to be true, and she's going to be wanting to keep some anxiety and wanting to keep highly motivated to do good in school. So I hope that answered that question.
Yes,
That's kind of long-winded.
I've been keeping
Sorry,
track.
I'm very late to you guys' session. I'm Donna. I'm a young therapist, just started out. So I wish I had come on a little bit earlier listening to some of your techniques, because I myself love exposure therapy. And I normally start my clients with me, having that discussion with me, talking to me as if they're, and then take them to familiar places like the supermarket where they normally go all the time. So they start from those familiar places. Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's great. Baby steps work. Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And I also love to put them on trial as well. I call the CBT challenging your thought a trial.
Yeah, we do one similar, like examine the evidence, where you kind of like you're a lawyer and you set up this trial. What's the evidence for? What's the evidence against? Can we refute?
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I love that technique.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you for joining us, Donna. Always nice to have more clinicians on the chat, on the call. So here's a question. And this person said, and this is the person who let us know they had missed some sessions. So I'm sure they're going to be heading over to the Facebook page and looking at the first sessions that we had, the introduction and the two other CBT sessions that we did. But can you maybe just recap some of the tools that someone would use for this situation? She says, how can you help someone? How would someone change the way they see themselves if they're convinced that they're a complete failure in everything? And I'm going to take a guess and say I see a cognitive distortion there that might be all or nothing.
Yeah, it sounds like, could be magnification and discounting the positive and whatnot. And it would be finding that moment in time and really unpacking what that means for that person, and getting all those negative thoughts down on the page, because chances are there's a lot of negative thoughts going on, and that's affecting this person. And like when I was able to deal with my perfectionism, it took a few go rounds. It wasn't an instant one-off. The anxiety went away, like the social anxiety. I was able to crush that pretty quickly. I did some shame attacking. I did some smile hello practice. And I was able to crush that. And then I had another anxiety phobia that was only related to one thing, and that was my dad has a tractor. Actually tobacco, and I was always nervous watching him. And in fact, that got worse and worse, because I started avoiding watching him. I would turn my back whenever we were working in the yard. And it's interesting because it wasn't logical, because my dad actually works he used to work in logging on these huge, horrible inclines. That was far more dangerous than at home. He's rolled machines, he's caught fire, he's really gone through the gamut at work. And that never caused me any anxiety. But at home, on the lawn, where it should be totally fine, should be rational, I'm all scared that he's gonna flip it. Oh, don't flip it. And he seatbelted in, and even worst case now, he flipped it, it would be just flopped and he would get out. And but I couldn't. I tried all these rational tools. I tried all the cognitive tools, right? The daily mood log. I tried all of that, didn't work. And what worked was going up and like yanking on it and trying to pull the tractor over, and it went instantly. Where am I going with this? I'm sorry, I'm trying to go somewhere with this. So that's why we had to get specific, right? So even though I faced my social anxiety, I still had to deal with this tractor anxiety, which was irrational. And so that piece had to be crushed. So that's why we've got to get it down on paper and figure out what's going on. And then I had to deal with my fear of rejection. So I ended up dealing with perfectionism, got that done, felt way better, felt, less depression, crushed my depression, got off antidepressants. But I still would have these tinges, like when I would be in a group of my peers. I was always worried, well, I don't have a master's or a doctorate. I have a diploma from the College of Professional Counseling. So I always felt like, well, that's not gonna be good enough. And they're gonna think I'm, I shouldn't be teaching because I don't, I'm not a doctor. And so I'd have these kind of thoughts. So then I'd put those down, and then I was able to crush that self-defeating belief. So we have these negative, I guess this would be a good way to explain it this moment. We have these emotions that affect us. We have negative thoughts that cause the negative emotions. And then we have self-defeating beliefs that cause the negative thoughts. And so we can crush the negative thoughts, but we still might need to do some work to get to the self-defeating belief, right? That deeper subconscious piece.
Okay.
How do you deal with this? Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
Oh, sorry. Which question were you looking at?
Will you tell me, because I don't want to skip any questions, but I've seen another one here about how to help someone who's diagnosed with a mental health problem. Is that the next one, Hebron, or did I miss any?
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, that's a great question. I would say I would highly recommend the book Feeling Good Together by David Burns, and just really improving your own empathy and listening and sharing, and sharing your own experience. This piece of, so few people really hear what we're trying to tell them, and we feel very alone. We can have a lot of close friends, but sometimes we just don't really feel heard. And there's certain empathy tools that are really impactful to help a person feel heard and understood. Often, but not always, once they feel understood, they might be willing to hear some solutions. But until they've felt heard, offering any kind of actual solution tends to be met with resistance, because not because they're trying to be hard to get along with, but because of the piece we talked about yesterday, those positive values that are behind some of those emotions, the advantages of what they're going through for themselves. I've had clients say being a victim is a pretty good advantage, because it's so overwhelming and I don't know where to start, that if I'm a victim, I don't have to start. It takes the pressure off. There's so much pressure in my life to do so many things, that if I can just hold on to my depression, it's one area where I feel a little bit of relief almost. And so I wouldn't want to try and help anyone until they're understanding that and processing that and they're ready. And actually empathy can be quite empowering. So that's what I would say if you want to help someone is, the book is called I'll put it in here, Feeling Good Together by David Burns.
Definitely. We'll follow up with a link from Amazon or from something.
Yeah. You can find it at Amazon and bookstores. He's extremely like millions published of these books.
Definitely. I got mine from Aid Books, a used bookstore, and further many other used bookstores that you can get it from.
Yeah, and if he and he has a lot of free stuff. Like I say, he's got a lot of podcasts. There's a lot of podcasts, and some of it has a lot of talking. But if you skip the sales pitch of the upcoming workshops, if you skip that part, you can get a lot of free stuff on his website. His website is feelinggood.com.
Okay, feelinggood.com. Okay, I'll be sure to
how do you access the book? I think I just answered that. You can do it Amazon, bookstores. There's Audible carries it if you want to do an ebook, or like a listening book.
Yeah, and we'll have all of this information in the resources section on the Compassion Health website as well. So, okay, so for the next question, how can we combat ruminating thoughts, sometimes thinking of the past constantly and not being able to live in the present?
Oh, great question. As someone with, I have this time where like you lay in bed and you go, I shouldn't have said that. Why did I say that? There's can be all kinds. What I would say is, again, I would get specific, because what causes my ruminating thoughts might be different from you. It could be like, for me, it was fear of rejection, but I've had people where it's approval addiction, where they have, and so they're ruminating on like, oh, I shouldn't have done this. But then you can have ruminating thoughts that are something else, like I'm scared I'm going to catch this COVID, or it could be a ruminating. So it could be, it's just really general. So I'd have to know, you'd be more specific. So I'd want to kind of pick a moment in time when you were feeling distressed, get out a daily mood log, and start listing those ruminating thoughts down, and then attack them one by one.
Definitely. And I think
Oh, I will give you one tool tip. There's a couple tool tips too. So I would do the cognitive piece. That's really important. But also there's one tool called worry practice, worry breaks, where you give yourself permission for like 5 minutes a day to do all your worrying, or beating up yourself, if that's where your go-to is. So if the ruminating thoughts are where you're beating yourself up, you give yourself 5 minutes to just beat up yourself and feel bad and feel miserable and criticize yourself. And then after the 5 minutes, you're like, okay, 5 minutes is up, it's time to move on. And then you move on. And that's not always particularly a helpful tool, but it can be. So that's just, like I say, there's lots of different tools, and some work for some people and some work for others. For me, I have ADHD. There's a quote from my favorite author that says, if your mind wanders, bring it back. So I will say that out to myself. Oh, I'm ruminating, or oh, my mind is wandering. No time. Right now is the time to fall asleep. And sometimes I got sticky notes everywhere. Sometimes I'll do a sticky note, and that helps me take that thought out from running around in my brain to putting it down, and like, I'll deal with that in appropriate time. But right now, my time is that I need to go get ready for bed. So anyways, that's just a couple tools. There's lots of others. It depends on the thought, depends on how we have to get specific.
Yeah, and I think we've gone to the point where we've kind of gone through it enough that we're when a question comes up, we're basically just naming what are the tools that we've mentioned before, and these are the tools that you would use for that. I think that's a good place to be. So this next one is, how do you deal with being self-conscious? And I think you actually touched on that, because you were saying that you dealt with being self-conscious at one time.
Yeah, I would treat it like a self-defeating belief. And again, the book I mentioned yesterday was When Panic Attacks. But I mean, you can find stuff online too. I would put it down on a daily mood log and start listing what am I telling myself about being self-conscious? What am I telling myself about what I expect from other people, or what I expect for approval, or so yeah. Again, would be definitely getting specific. I see Shane has his hand up.
Yes. Yeah, go ahead, Shane. You can unmute yourself and ask your question. Thank you.
Yeah. Recently a couple of years ago, I got in a very bad accident in a vehicle. And I found since that time, when I'm getting a ride somewhere and the person's not necessarily driving fast, but let's say around 60 kilometers, I find that I get scared. I get frightened. I get very uncomfortable because of the experience being in the accident. When this other vehicle that I was in ran into the back of another vehicle. Um, so what do you do with the anxiety when you feel uncomfortable like that in a vehicle experience? How do you get over something like that?
Oh, it's a good question, Shane, and I'm sorry that you went through that bad accident. And I can relate. We were in a rollover, and it caused some real anxiety for some of the family members in the rollover that we experienced, and it can stick with us for quite a while. And I would say that, it kind of very similar to what we've been talking about already, and that is to like start off by really acknowledging that anxiety's been protecting you, Shane, because you want to be careful about not getting an accident again. And we know that accidents happen more frequently with all these cars on the road, and especially in a densely populated area. And so that would be the place I'd start, is kind of listing all the good reasons for your anxiety, like we did yesterday. How it's working for you, and then from there you can kind of decide if it's working for me. Is it something I want to work on? And if it is, if it's like, yeah, this is still bugging me, it's still too much, Then I would do a daily mood log, and I would do some cognitive pieces, but then I would try and do some exposure. And I would recommend you maybe reach out to someone to do that work, and they could kind of walk you through some exposure techniques, or you could look at some of these self-help materials. But I'd be reluctant to do any personal advice in a situation like this when I don't know your whole story and situation. So I hope that was helpful. I'm trying to be as helpful as I can without, crossing a line of saying something that might hurt someone or get them into trouble if they weren't getting the support that they needed.
Could I jot in something?
Sure.
Walking away from the noise. You could also just evaluate the other experiences you've had in vehicles. How often is it that somebody do meet in an accident like that? Have you ever met in another accident like that? Have you had a car experience or vehicle experience or experience being on the road has been similar to that? So evaluate what's happening or what have happened in your past with regards to other experiences that you've had in cars and stuff like that. And just try to tell yourself this was just a one-off experience, something did happen, and, talk yourself through that process. Remind yourself that it's not something that will always happen every single day. And try to, as she said, expose yourself, try to get yourself exposed, but you definitely would need some sort of professional help to get through that exposure, because exposure can definitely be hard. So.
Yeah, I love that. We talked about examine the evidence yesterday, and go ahead, Hebron.
Yeah, sorry. I have a question as well. My question is, for traumatic experiences, do you use the same team CBT tools, or are there different tools that we use for trauma? How is that?
Absolutely, I use the exact same tools. I'm treating symptoms, not disorders. So I'm treating how that person's feeling: anxiety, guilt, emotion, shame, anger, alone, reject. These we're treating these emotions and the thoughts that are causing the emotions, and what precipitated those thoughts and emotions. Those are important to understand in the context of what we can use for tools. But certainly we still use the same tools. David's done work with people. He had one lady, she had severe panic attacks, 3 or 4 a week for 10 years. She would go to the hospital and get tested for heart attacks. She was having to quit work. They were just happening so often. And he did some very similar tools here. He went through identify the distortions. He did the cognitive piece, and then for the exposure work, he had her induce her own panic attack in his office, and they worked through it together. That was, I think, 15 years ago, and she said she's only ever had one since that one cure. She's only had it one other time, and it only lasted 15 seconds to 30 seconds because she just did the same thing that they did in the office. The tool that worked in the office worked for her ever after. So yeah, we do use the same tools. Absolutely.
While I was doing practicum, I was pushed to use CBT for every single client that I had, because they wanted you to master CBT before you move on to anything else. And I must say, CBT is a very, very powerful tool if used in the right way for almost everything.
Yeah, and like I say, we use, like you say, there's lots of tools. Like I use CBT in conjunction with these other tools, like these exposure tools. And there's one I really love called externalization of voices, which is more a psychodynamic technique, but we still draw from the cognitive work we've done with the client, because they're able to fight these negative thoughts in real time using things like self-acceptance and self-defense. And yeah, there's so much. Lady Nancy has her hand up.
Yes, please go ahead and unmute yourself.
Good afternoon, everyone. I have been in 2 major car accidents where the car was totaled, both my fault, and I prior to that, the last one, I had I don't remember exactly when the first one was 2013. The second one was 2017. But anyhow, um, it was probably 2018. But anyhow, I had this thing where I used to always dream of like another one, you know, like every dream I had. And it didn't used to be like a nightmare, it used to be like an experience, you know, like a good experience, like that's how I get out my aggression or something. And until I had the second one, it stopped. The second car accident. I never had such a dream ever again, you know. And so I don't know what is that all about, but I was like, well, God is giving a premonition, another one's gonna happen, you know. But I did have diagnosed with sleep apnea, but it was delayed for 8 years. So I was pretty much driving around in what you say, you know, with incapacitated, but God brought me through, you know, because I'm a registered nurse. I'm a trauma nurse as well, and in the past. And so I also had a accident when I was 4 years old, and a motor vehicle accident that I survived. So in any case, it just stopped. And I don't know if it's prayers or what. I don't even remember when it started. I want to believe it started after the first one that I recall, you know, the most two recent motor vehicle accident. But that's all I wanted to say. That, you know, I often wonder what is that dream about? The dreams, you know. So
Yeah, well,
I'm being treated, by the way, I wanted to say that I'm being treated with CBT-I, which I don't like screens too much, you know. So I kind of memorize what the coaches do, and I do it on my own, you know. I don't like the screens too much. But and it is helping me relax, and I'm sleeping better. And so, you know, but I'm knowledge in my past. I've had a lot of things that I've overcome, so I have faith and I have confidence I'll get over this, because I had two drownings, and I would that's why I didn't want to get baptized by water ever until it happened, you know. And I didn't mind learning to swim in the middle of New York City in the middle of the winter and swim in laps, but I did not want anybody tilting me backwards. I don't have control over it. So, you know, that, so, you know, I was afraid of lizards, but I wasn't afraid of snakes too much, and I overcame the fright of lizards, because I was like, well, if I not too much afraid of snakes, and snakes is more dangerous than lizards, you know, I kind of used that kind of, you know, and I overcome the fear. I don't let it overtake me, because I'm like, if you don't bother me, then you have no real power. You know, that's the way I looked at it. You know, if you don't come at me, if you come at me and you can hurt me, then you have power. But if you come at me and you still can't hurt me, you have no power. So it's a lot of things I went through that I overcame by using logics. I think that's what I think. I don't know if it makes sense.
Yeah, I love what you're saying, Lady Nancy. And a lot of the techniques are logic techniques. Some of them are logic techniques. We have compassion-based techniques, exposure techniques. There's psychodynamic techniques. There's all kinds. And the cognitive behavior isn't just cognitive. And I don't just use cognitive behavior either. Like I use what they call team CBTs. There's quite a few more tools. And so you're right on the money. Logic works really well for me too. But I have other clients where the compassion techniques are more helpful. So that's why I love having so many tools in the toolbox, because what works for one person will definitely work for others, but it won't work for everyone. And so I love logic too. So I could really relate to that. And I could also relate to your story where, you know, we have fear, and then, you know, the fear kind of continues, and it can continue in dreams or in ruminating thoughts. And then once we go through it again, we're like, oh, I did get through. And like you said, you have faith and you did get through it. You learn the monster has no teeth, so to speak. And then of course it goes away after that point. I had a fear of falling off a horse. We had gotten horses and I was terrified of falling off. And then I fell off, hit my head unconscious, was dragged by the horse, and my fear was gone after that. So you would think I'd be more afraid after a traumatic event, but I was less afraid after that. So
is that because you realized that you could survive it?
yeah, I don't, the thoughts stopped, right? Because the thoughts were always, I'm going to fall off and that makes me a bad rider or a bad person, or I don't know, like there was just so many thoughts attached to it. This was a long time ago, so I don't really remember exactly all my thoughts, but there's probably a lot of what ifs. What if this were happened? What if that happened? And then after it happened, it was like, okay, it happened. I got through it. God's here. He's protected me. I can do this. Much like Nancy was saying about her faith. So.
Yeah, I don't blame you for being afraid of falling off a horse. It seems pretty dangerous to me. I'm glad that the thought stopped after your accident, though. I'm sorry that
it's exposure, right? I think a piece of it is exposure. I was
Thank
exposed to falling off, and because I was exposed to falling off, then it kind of went away. Shauna.
Hi.
Hi.
It's I know it's the last day, but it's my first time. I realize that I have anxiety, and yes, we are living in stressful times, but I was listening to, I don't remember his name. The gentleman who said that he was afraid after being in the car accident. I have a fear. I was in a car accident as well, but it really wasn't it wasn't a bad one, but somebody was driving my car and I was in the front passenger seat, and the person ran into the back of another car. And I saw the accident happening before it actually happened. And then that same person was driving me another time, and they were angry and they were driving really fast and, not carefully. And since then, I realized that I developed anxiety whenever that person was driving, whenever any other person was driving and I was not the driver. I would become very anxious. And if they went above a certain speed, I could not look. I'd have to close my eyes or turn away or something. And one of the things that really affected me was the same person who was driving me, and he was angry. He drove over a bridge that it's like a hump bridge. So, you go up and then you go down. And I remember being really scared when he was driving down, because I also have a fear of heights. But I used to drive over that bridge without any issues. But now, if I'm to drive over that bridge or any other high bridge, I get scared. In fact, there's one bridge I can't drive over up to now. But I have improved. And what I did, I saw a therapist, but I think maybe I need to see another therapist. But what I learned from that was to self-talk. I also would go through when I'm at home, I would go through the journey in my mind, step by step. And I would, remind myself that it's okay. This is something I've done before and I can do it again, and I will get, to my destination safely. I also reminded myself that God is with me, and I would listen to, soothing gospel music, and I would repeat Bible verses that remind me that God is with me. And when all else fails, I would just repeat, Jesus is with me, and with Jesus I can make it. And that has helped. All those things have helped me to get to a place where I can comfortably drive over the bridge again. I'm still a work in progress, but I hope that some of those things can help him too. Yes.
Thank you, Shauna. And personal testimonies are really great, because that's, yeah. What it's never, and what we go through, our personal experience is always valid, and to share that with others, it can be helpful for sure. Yes, we are running out of time, and so we probably should wrap up.
Yes.
Before I launch into storytelling.
Oh, man. Which I think we would all enjoy, but in respect for your time, thank you so much for your time, and thank you so much to our wonderful participants for sharing your stories and your questions, and it's just been such a great experience. I just want to encourage everyone, if you are experiencing significant distress or concerns, we've listed a list of resources in the chat. All of the information for all of our professional volunteers is listed there in that little message that the admin just sent. And so please go ahead and seek the support that you need, and be on your way in that journey of healing, right? Because we all need that healing, and sometimes we need a little bit of support. We need a little bit of help to help us on that way. I also want to encourage you all to go ahead and visit the Compassion Health Facebook page and send us a message. You can go ahead and send us a message telling us what kind of events you want to see us do next. And so if this has been helpful for you and you want us to go into more of this, you're hoping that there's going to be some shame attacking or anything like that interests you, go ahead and drop a link, drop a message to us on Facebook. I'm not going to promise that we're going to do everything that we're told, but that will help us, that will inform our decisions going forward and help us to really choose the events that are going to serve the community, because we really want to love God and serve others. So again, as we wrap up, this has been the Fear Not Conference. Thank you so much for participating, for joining us. And please go ahead and hit up the Facebook page and the Compassion Health website, where more information will be listed. We're actually going to be updating that website as we go along to further support you with everything that we've brought up during this conference. So thank you, Angela, for joining us.
Thanks for having me, Hebron.
And yeah, that's the conference. Bye, everyone.
Goodbye.
Bye.
Thanks, Donna.
Bye-bye.
Oh, thank you.
Well, I'm going to sign off. It's my anniversary today, 29 years with the same husband.